All right, so what I'm here to talk about is leaky gut, all right, and how this is the back door to autoimmune disease, systemic inflammation, and cancer, all right? So is it ever a good thing to have a leaky gut? The answer is yes, especially in the first year of your life, right? So one principle is every mammal, right? Every mammal has a leaky gut at birth. And every mammal is born vaginally, all right, except for what? Just like a duck-billed platypus or something, but let's pretend that doesn't exist. Every mammal except the duck-billed platypus is born vaginally. Why? Because that's our first exposure to those good bacteria, those probiotics, for our body to start making antibodies, okay? Number two, every mammal, for the most part, is breastfed. Okay, and why is that? Because mom's milk is not only the perfect nutritional ratio of carbs, fat, and protein, but also it has very critical antibodies, okay? Those good white blood cells that the baby needs in order to start fighting infection, bacteria, any of those outside invaders, okay? The gut is leaky to let those antibodies, those proteins through, okay, for mom to be able to deliver the right elements to baby. Okay, but let me explain something. Right here, this is a picture of, okay, so entry to the gut, your mouth, your esophagus, etc. That's the stomach, intestine. And then these are epithelial cells of the intestine, okay, where you absorb nutrients. These are called gap junctions, okay? So those are the areas between these epithelial cells that actually close up the permeability. In other words, like it doesn't let stuff through. This here is your vessel. So once things enter through the epithelial cells, they're absorbed into your bloodstream. All right, let's take something like carbohydrate, for example. Okay, carbohydrate, okay, broken down into saccharides, disaccharides, okay, into those, smaller sugar elements, okay, starts happening in the mouth and then happens, through the digestive process, okay? So carbohydrate comes down. Actually, carbohydrate is readily absorbed by the body, okay? Flows through everything because sugar, small sugar elements are smaller than 500 Daltons. That seems to be the cutoff from your immune system to let things through. Basically, your body is very intelligent. It knows that this certain size of things it wants to let through, like sugars. Sugar is nutrition. Other things that are really small are things like mercury, for example. Mercury has a molecular weight of less than 500 Daltons as well. Go figure, that's what they use in vaccines. That's why it gets through. So carbohydrate comes through, doesn't need gap junction opening to get through, readily absorbed by the vessel, and then goes into your liver for glycogen storage and utilized for energy and muscle and things like that. Okay, so that's carbohydrate. Now let's talk about things like proteins. All right, so proteins are a little bit bigger, okay? And proteins are mostly digested in the stomach. Proteins are broken down in the stomach into things called amino acids. Okay, amino acids are then absorbed through the epithelial cells into your bloodstream. Great. Now, let's take something like this guy. What is that? Cholera. You heard of that? Bad news, okay? Cholera gets into your system, okay? Cholera is big time, big guy, big bacteria, whatever it is. It's bad bug in your system, right? So what happens is you have receptors on your epithelial cells that recognize things that are invaders, that are too big to get through. So this receptor recognizes this big bad cholera bug. what happens? Okay, something very intelligent happens. It signals your DNA to make a protein called zonulin. Okay, let's just make it Z for short. Okay, zonulin is then activated and causes what? Causes leaky gut. What happens is it relaxes this smooth muscle in your gap junctions. Boom, lets everything through. You ever had diarrhea before? Nastiest diarrhea of your life with cholera. Okay? It's going to let everything through, everything's going to flow. Smart or stupid? Very smart, right? So zonulin activates leaky gut. Boom, everything gets through, including cholera. Your body needs to flush it all out. Down here, okay, in your bloodstream, you have this big Pac-Man looking guy. Okay, this is called a dendritic cell. You don't need to know that. The dendritic cell, okay, attaches to this guy, the cholera bug, and it sets off a cascade of reactions in the body. It activates your immune system. It activates something called your TH1, okay, immune system, and it also activates your TH2 immune system. Okay, TH1, those send off something called natural killer cells. Boom, those guys are killers. Those guys create all kinds of havoc, destroy everything, okay? So with this, what happens is you start to get all this cytotoxic inflammation. Now what happens with the TH2? Okay, this is also activated through the humoral response in your bone marrow. Okay, so it activates your B cells. Okay, which then also activates your plasma cells, which mature, okay, into cells called your antibodies. You've heard of these before. The antibodies, those are your white blood cells that recognize infection, influenza, viral things that your body's seen before. So it creates these antibodies so when it sees things again, it can react very quickly. Those antibodies, they give off things like anti-nuclear antibodies, okay, against zonulin. Okay, if we did a blood test, this is how we recognize that there's an possible immune reaction going on, okay? And it creates antibodies against what? Cholera. Boom. Okay. Now check this out. There's also this big protein called gluten. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, the gluten that's made these days from wheat products that are unrecognizable to our DNA, not like the wheat we had hundreds of years ago. So you've got this really strange protein called gluten. Guess what happens? It binds to the exact same protein or receptor here as cholera did. And what happens? Okay, sets off the zonulin response, creates leaky gut. Boom, we got leaky gut going on again. Gluten gets through. Okay, that's also activated and sucked up by this dendritic cell. The same thing happens. The TH1 response, creating natural killer cells, creating more cytotoxic inflammation. TH2 response gets set off, creating B cells, plasma cells, and then antibodies against what now? This strange protein called gluten. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, if you have celiac, okay, you're going to get major diarrhea, you're going to get major inflammation, destruction of some of your epithelial cells, right? If you're mildly allergic to gluten, you're going to get some of this response happening, less leaky gut. Now, when the autoimmune stuff that happens, guess what happens? These antibodies against gluten, these actually look very similar to tissues in your body. Tissues like joint structures, okay? Tissues that create autoimmune diseases like maybe the myelin sheaths of your nervous system causing things like multiple sclerosis, okay? Psoriatic or arthritis, those arthritic conditions that are autoimmune derived. So this whole cascade is all set off by things like gluten. That's why it's my strong advice to avoid gluten-containing foods, okay? Because you get this inflammatory reaction, okay, through the Th1 immunity and the Th2 immunity, possibly creating some autoimmune responses, okay? Especially in the first year of life, when you already have leaky gut, these proteins are getting through like crazy, okay? So there you have it. There is my leaky gut, okay, and why this is a backdoor for inflammation. Okay, inflammation leads to things like autoimmune diseases and cancer.